Jose, welcome to Locked In. Thank you to Lefty, who connected me to Jeannie, who brought you here today.
And I'm glad it all came about.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's not every day we get a true OG on the show to share his experience.
I don't know about that OG stuff.
Now, can you explain to the audience what the organization is that you work with and why it's so important and why you're here today?
The organization I work with, I'm the executive director, is the Release Aging People in Prison campaign. And this is a grassroots community organizing and advocacy group. And we advocate for the release of people who are serving long-term prison sentences. Most of them are older New Yorkers in the state system. And unfortunately, some of the policies of mass incarceration has created a crisis in the New York State prison system. People coming in with long-term prison sentences, longer than ever before, and then the parole board being complicit, denying parole over and over and over. And in between, we're just getting old, sicker, and in too many cases dying. So this is the public health crisis that RAP is trying to correct.
And how long have you been with the organization for?
I got out in 2018, and I've been in January 2018, and a couple of weeks after that, I reported for duty.
You hit the ground running. And it's, I love that you use your lived experience. I think that's what makes the most amount of change. Individuals that use lived experience to help others. I think that does more than any politician or non-person that's never been in those shoes before can do. Did you grow up in New York?
Yes, I grew up in Spanish Harlem. We call El Barrio.
My dad worked in Spanish Harlem. Okay. He was a teacher. Yeah,
I probably know him.
Yeah, he was born in Brooklyn. He's 79 now. Michael Bick. I don't know if the name sounds familiar, but he was an educator in Spanish Harlem schools, and eventually worked up to principal and ran a couple schools there too. He would share some crazy stories from back in those days, the 70s and the 80s. Who did you grow up with?
I grew up with my parents and my siblings, brothers and sisters. We grew up on 101st Street in Spanish Harlem and 111th Street, 116th Street, all areas that's identified as Spanish Harlem.
What did your parents do for work?
Well, my father was a truck driver. My mom was just a housewife.
Did you guys have money growing up?
No, we were very poor. My pops, he was out of work often. He was drinking a lot. So, self-imposed prison sort of. So we grew up in poverty, extreme poverty sometimes.
How would you say people would describe you as a kid, young Jose?
Well, where I lived, there was I guess I wouldn't use this terminology today, I guess, where sex workers, a building where sex workers did their business. And for some reason, they took to me as a little boy. I was their errand boy. So I got identified as being an errand boy for the sex workers early in my childhood.
And would you say that was a bad reputation to have?
It didn't impact me at all. I felt comfortable with them. They were young, mostly Puerto Rican and black girls, and perhaps even 16, 17 years old. But they were very young. And I felt good with them. I felt, that they befriended me, and I appreciated the company.
What were your aspirations growing up? Did you have goals, dreams for the rest of your life?
I wanted to be a baseball player. My dream was to be a great Puerto Rican baseball player. I used to go with my pops to the park and hold his glove, hold his bat. And that's the only dream I had coming up. I just wanted to be a baseball player, more so to please him. But I took a loving to the sport. The sport really gave me something to dream about. Other than that, I had no other dream.
Did you play in high school?
Yes, I played all the way up until, I played all the way up until I went to high school. I went to a high school in the Bronx, and sadly, they didn't have a baseball team. So I played football and I ran track and field.
Why do you have to go to the Bronx for school?
Because my mom's move. It's an upgrade. We moved to the Bronx. It's a better building. Where we were living in Spanish Harlem, it was rat infested. It was horrible. As a kid, you don't see that. But, things happen. I had some experiences growing up in Spanish Harlem that really changed my life. And I think that was the best decision my mom and pops made. We moved up to the Bronx, and being a resident of the Bronx, I had to go to a Bronx high school at that point.
What was that experience like for you? Was it better than the Spanish Harlem schools?
I always went back to Spanish Harlem, even though, there was a big difference in the neighborhood, but I just felt comfortable in Spanish Harlem. And at the time, going to high school, I had another dream now. I wanted to become a big-time drug dealer. So while I was going to high school, I was also selling drugs.
What do you think flicked that switch in you to become that?
Not having anything. Being poor, not having any of the things other kids had. Sometimes not having enough food. And I seen where the people in Spanish Harlem were selling dope, and they had all these fancy clothes. Sometimes they had these cars. They had everything. And I started to want to be like them.
Do you think those individuals are a bad influence on the youth in today's world just as much as it was back then?
When we say, that people influence us, the greatest influence was the perpetual poverty that we inherited. That more than anything else made us want to hold on to anything that will improve our lives. Whether it was a drug dealer that looks like he was successful or anything else. But a drug dealer's success was very visible to us. So it's something that we just latched on to.
At the time, did you feel like there was no other way to get that type of, income or, monetary gain that you wanted other than selling drugs?
I thought that was the only realistic option for me. And not just, I was a street corner. I never made big time. I was just a street corner. And my career was cut short. I guess you can call it, I volunteered to stop selling drugs. But I don't know if you heard of the Young Lords Party. I was selling drugs when the Young Lords Party took over a church. At the time, I had no idea who they were. I had no idea whatsoever. They took over a church and they invited cops. Looks like every cop in the city was in Spanish Harlem then. They barricaded themselves in the church so I couldn't sell no drugs. And to me, I was furious at them. I said, who the hell these guys are? They're interrupting my little business here. But that's how I eventually behind being politicized by members of the Young Lords Party. That's what stopped me from wanting to become a drug dealer.
So where did you turn to when that happened?
Bank robbery.
In New York City?
In New York City.
How old were you when that happened?
I was in my mid-20s. The Young Lord. I did time. I did time before that. I did time for weapons charges and possession of 2 pipe bombs in relationship to being a member of the Young Lords Party. When I got out of prison, the party has dismantled. So I had to turn to something.
What is the party for people that don't know?
The party. When I say the party, I mean the Young Lords Party.
And who are they, or are they?
The Young Lords Party, the best way to describe them for people who are not familiar with them is they're a Puerto Rican version of the Black Panther Party. They sought to address the conditions for Puerto Rican people living not only in New York, but across the country. And the same perpetual poverty, underemployment, unemployment, uneducated, all these conditions, lack of medical care and treatment, All these conditions were being addressed. They sought to address that. The rat-infested buildings that we were living in, rats biting children. I grew up with rats actually biting children, infants. Infants eating lead, poisoning from the paint of the buildings. So all these conditions were just overlooked. We thought nothing of it. We thought this is just the way it is. But the young laws exposed all this by taking over a church. And then when they were released, after they were all arrested, they were released right within a few days. And then they came around with leaflets, started talking to the people. The media now, it created a lot of media attention in this small community. And for the first time, people were really aware of what was going on in Spanish Harlem.
What attracted you to them?
The message. I'm a Puerto Rican, and I never identified with the island of Puerto Rico because I was born in New York City. I resisted my parents telling me about how beautiful the island is, because if it was that beautiful, why are we here? But I had no real identity as far as that's concerned. My heritage was lost to me. But they came and they gave me all that. They gave me an identity that I could be proud of, a history that I could be proud of, and a heritage that I could really be a part of. And this is just for me and all the first generation Puerto Ricans that I knew that I was hanging out with. We all identify with the Young Laws Party after a few weeks, few months of being around them, listening to them, going to the political education classes, and then understanding that selling drugs is a collaboration with people who are oppressing us. So this is why we all decided. I was the last one to actually make the decision to stop selling drugs, because I didn't have no other way of making money. But ultimately, we all made that decision, that little crew that I was a part of, that we become members of the Young Laws Party, and we will no longer sell drugs to our people. Was
it normal to have someone of your age at that time join, like someone that was young?
I was 18 when I joined the Young Laws Party. We were all about the same age, 16, 17, 18 years old.
That feeling you just described of wanting to be a part of that, do you think that relates to kids who join gangs wanting to feel something like that, a similar feeling? I would say so. More, for us, because, we were so alienated, not only from society, but from just 2 blocks away, you have what we call Black Harlem. So, and the other way, you had the Italians. So we were caught in the middle between the Italians and the blacks. So we were kind of alienated from just about everybody. And wanting to be a part of something greater than ourselves, I guess that's the same reason why these kids want to be a part of a gang member, want to be part of gangs. Being a gang member gives them that sense of having something that's, to them, a family that they lack. Although I had a family, but like I said, my pops was in and out of our lives because of his drinking. Some folks didn't have a father with them. They only had a mother. So being a part of a gang would give them more of like a complete family. What did your parents think that you were joining this? My pops was actually curious about it, because my mom and pops, they were born and raised, they came to from Puerto Rico, when they were adults. After World War II, they came to Puerto Rico. So they was aware of the Puerto Rican independence movement. They knew who my heroes now, Don Pedro Albizu Campos and Doña Lolita Lebrón, they knew who these people were. I was really upset that you never told me who they were. So, they were, I think they were happy in a way that I was identified with my Puerto Rican culture, but probably concerned that it would take me somewhere else. So why weapons and pipe bombs at that age? Well, becoming attached to the Puerto Rican independence movement, America became our enemy. The American government, not the American people,
but the American government. I had no way. I didn't really know anything about making bombs. I'm learning about making bombs by a book. You know, and in fact, the 2 pipe bombs that I was arrested with, they were inoperable. But you know, it didn't matter to the state. So it was just experimenting. I was experimenting. I wanted to do something. You know, I had purpose now. You know, I just wasn't chasing a dream that was never going to be a reality, becoming a baseball player. I had purpose. I wanted to be a part of a movement that had a principle purpose and that gave me something to live for.
Did you ever intend to use those on individuals, or was it going to be buildings?
Buildings. No. We never discussed, you know, blowing people up. It's buildings and more government. And it was just all talk. It was just plotting without any real intention of doing it.
So after you got out for those weapons charges, what made you decide you wanted to rob a bank? And how did you go about that?
Well, I wanted to, you know, inside I started reading more books, started becoming revolutionized, started identifying more with the Black Panther Party, started identifying more with the indigenous peoples movements, Puerto Rican independence movement. And we knew that to develop the type of organization that we needed to develop, we needed money. So that's why we started robbing banks.
And there was a group of you that did that?
It's a group of us.
Did you guys have a name that you called yourselves?
Well, at that time, we was all Muslims. And we called ourselves the Islamic 100.
And was this a string of banks that you guys decided to hit? All national banks or?
No, in Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, Manhattan.
Were any of you guys experienced in this, or were you all kind of just trying this for the first time?
There were some of us who were experiencing it.
So how do you end up getting caught?
Well, by accident. It was really an accident. I was already identified through surveillance as one of the people involved in bank robberies. Some of the younger people got busted, so I was identified as the leader of this group. And so I was wanted. I was a fugitive. And in 1979, I think the early 80s, there was a FBI surveillance team. Right across the street, I went to a house right across the street where a surveillance team was stationed. And that surveillance team was watching a house of somebody who they suspected assisted Assata Shakur, who was a member of the Black Liberation Army's escape from prison. So they had that house under surveillance. The house next to it is the house that I was going to. I had no idea about this, none whatsoever. But I stood in the car. I was with 2 other people, and they went up to the house in Brooklyn. And I stood in the car because I know I'm wanted. I didn't want to come out. But something, I guess the people in there was taking too long to come back out. I got out the car, and I looked around, and somebody in the surveillance team identified me as somebody wanted for bank robberies. So they stormed the house that I went in, and that's how I got captured. How
many robberies were you wanted for at that time? 13. Did you guys get serious money or?
No. I mean, at the time, you figure that $25,000, $30,000 at the time seemed like a lot of money, but when you have 3 or 4 people participate in the bank robbery, it's not really a lot of money. That's why you have to rob so many banks.
Do you know how you first got on their radar to begin with to become a wanted fugitive? That was just from the surveillance? Like you guys didn't wear masks or anything? Or?
We wore masks in some places, but a couple of people got arrested, and that's how they found out who the others were.
Why did you decide to stay in the city, even being, wanted?
Well, actually, I didn't stay in the city. I came back.
Ah, okay. So you were successfully on the run, and then when you came back, that's what got you. Interesting. Did you regret coming back after that moment?
I regret everything I've done in my life. so much, but that's it happened. There's nothing we can do about that. But I wind up, well, before that, I have to just backtrack a little bit. We got stopped by police, and there was a gun battle. And one of us was shot. Police sergeant took a shotgun blast in the face. So I was wanted for that too.
And you had shot the cop, or you were just a part of it?
I was there.
So when you got arrested, the feds arrest you, and just on the bank robbery charges.
Right.
And that was a federal case for the bank robberies. And then after that, do they send you to the state?
While I was serving time in this federal prison system, I was indicted for attempted murder of a police officer. And then they came and got me by the Interstate Agreement Act and charged me, and I went to trial and I was convicted and got sentenced to 25 years to life.
So the police officer survived the attack?
He survived the attack.
Okay. So for the bank robbers, do you go to trial for that, or you took a plea deal?
I got 18 years for the bank robbery.
After trial?
Yeah.
You like taking it to trial, huh? I took my case to trial.
I just wasn't copping out.
Was there co-defendants on your bank robbery case, or just you?
My co-defendants got arrested before me, and they copped out. I went to trial.
Why do you think you went to trial, looking back on it now?
Defiance. It's a surrender. I just wasn't built that way.
Do you think you got that from your dad?
No. I got that from identifying with historic figures.
Who do you feel like you identified the most with?
Two people that I think perhaps had the most influence on me. Don Pedro Albizu Campos, who was the leader of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, and Malcolm X.
Why those two specifically?
Because the way they dealt with the people, how they related to the people, how they was able to talk to people, meet them where they were, so that they could have an understanding of the message. And in particular, Don Pedro Albizu Campos used to Malcolm X mobilized people in groups, big crowds. His message was pretty clear. Don Pedro Albizu Campos' message was a one-on-one. He went from door to door, house to house, talking to the people and listening to the people, understanding their concerns, their interests, their desires. And sometimes they were in alignment with his, and that was okay. He was still able to relate to the people.
What year did you step foot inside federal prison?
1980.
And how old were you at that time?
I think I was 29 or 30.
You know that feeling when you finally find something that just works? That's exactly how I felt when I first discovered Orgain years ago while I was working at Whole Foods, and I've been using it ever since. I've tried a ton of protein powders, shakes, and bars over the years, and let's be real, most of them taste like chalk mixed with regret. But then I found Orgain and everything changed. This podcast is sponsored by Orgain, a brand that actually gets it when it comes to real nutrition, and I absolutely love it. They believe that what you put in your body matters, and their products are made with USDA certified organic ingredients, which means no soy, no artificial sweeteners, no weird preservatives, just the good stuff. I've been using Orgain since my days working at Whole Foods, and it's been a staple in my routine ever since. Whether I'm rushing to record an episode, hitting the gym, which as you guys know, I've been doing 6 days a week. Make sure you follow me on Instagram to check out those workouts, or just need something quick and nutritious, Orgain always delivers. And if you're someone who struggles with dairy, like me, or gets that upset stomach from traditional protein powders, you're gonna love their vegan protein powder, shakes, and bars. No more feeling bloated or uncomfortable, just smooth, delicious, and easy to digest protein. Just this morning, I made a quick Orgain shake with their chocolate fudge plant protein powder, which we also have now in the studio fully stocked, and it legit tasted like a milkshake, except it packed 21 grams of complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids. It's smooth, it's delicious, and actually tastes good without needing to blend it with 50 other ingredients. And it's not just the powder. Orgain has ready-to-drink shakes, protein bars, and tons of other options to keep you fueled throughout the day. We even keep our podcast studio stocked with Orgain, as I was telling you guys earlier, because let's be real, life gets busy and having something quick and nutritious is a game changer. Remember, there are no quick fixes when it comes to your health. If you want more protein, give Orgain Organic Plant Protein Powder a try. Head to Orgain.com/Ian Bick and use code Ian Bick for 30% off your order. That's the best offer you're going to find out there, but you have to use my code Ian Bick for 30% off. One last time for 30% off, head to Orgain.com/Ian Bick and use my code Ian Bick. Trust me, your body will thank you for this one. Now let's get back into today's episode. What was the federal prison experience like for you? Because that was a whole different world back then in the federal system.
I was kind of prepared for it because I heard so much about the system. And it was almost a war zone.
Why do you say war zone?
You know, you're shipped across the country. It's not like you're with the people you grew up with. You got homeboys there. Basically, you're on your own. And you have to just step up, not depending on anybody. It was, the state system was a little different. You couldn't, in the federal system when I was there, one thing I say about there was a lot of respect because you couldn't say things to people and think you're not going to be held accountable. That's the difference between the state at that time. Now I think they're both probably the same. But back then, you had to watch what you said when you're dealing with somebody. You also had to be on point. I got into a few scuffles when I was in the federal prison system. But one thing I learned early is to be super aggressive, anticipate, and don't hesitate. And that's how I survived in the federal system.
Were there a lot of politics, like with cars, gangs, or anything during that time?
Not then, because the biggest gang was the DC guys. You know, they had numbers. The more out west you went, you had the Chicanos. Midwest, you had, you know, like the Chicago gangs, you know, but they weren't as they didn't dominate the system the way the people from D.C., because they basically had the numbers wherever you went.
How many different federal prisons did you go to?
Atlanta, Leavenworth, Terre Haute, Marion, and Lewisburg.
And these were all USPs?
Right, federal penitentiaries.
Why did they move you around so much?
You gotta ask them. No, I mean, you know, listen, I did my time tough. I didn't do no calm time. You know, I've been in a few knife fights. I got stabbed. I did some stabbing. I was always trying to get out, so I've been charged with attempted escape a couple of times.
Attempted escape?
Yeah. Now, you know, not attempted escape in the fact that they caught me outside the walls or something, but, you know, the apparatus, the paraphernalia for escape, you know, stuff like that.
You always go out swinging, huh?
Well, I just you know, early childhood experiences, you know, left impacts on me.
Now, when you first started serving your federal sentence, you had no idea you were going to get hit with an indictment for the 25 to life.
I knew it was coming down.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So was your mindset just like, I'm going to be in here for the rest of my life?
Exactly. That's exactly how I lived in the federal prison system. That this is it. I'm not going nowhere. I don't have to behave a certain way. I do what the hell I want when I want.
So do you think if you knew there would be an opportunity to get out, you would have done your time differently?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, I knew I had a life sentence for New York. So I didn't care about when I left the federal system or not.
What do you think of life sentences?
Outside of, my own experience, what really impacted my thinking to get involved in this work, because it wasn't until I came to the state system that I started really looking at this, the harshness of, remember, I was doing 18 years in the federal system. I wasn't doing life. Now I'm doing a life sentence. But I think the first time I really started looking at what a life sentence really does to a person, to a family, I was in a visiting room. My youngest daughter had just started going to college. She came to visit me. And when you go to, you in prison, you go into the visiting room and you see somebody sitting in where you're supposed to be with your family, that's a cardinal violation. So that's what I saw. And the guy got up, went to where he was, where his family, wait for his family. And I asked my daughter, who's that guy? And she says, you don't remember him? I said, no. Where you know? I'm thinking she probably knows him from the hood, from where she's living. She said, that's so-and-so's son. And that kid was someone who the mother was bringing up to see his dad. And now he's wearing greens and the mother's coming to visit him. Now, when I talked to the kid, I was upset because, that's a cardinal violation for you to talk to my visitor without me being there. But when I talked to this kid, I found out that, I knew his pops, and he's doing a life sentence also. And I thought about it. I went back to myself saying, damn, if dad's doing life and he's doing life, and the mother is visiting both of them.
Was it hard to have those conversations with your children when they came to visit you?
My children was, because when they always ask you, Dad, when you coming home? I would always say, soon, very soon. Because I'm litigating. I'm also, doing a litigator. But there came a point when as they was growing up, they didn't want to hear that anymore. I remember I think it was my oldest daughter said, Dad, don't tell me soon, because soon means never. And then, the things that your children tell you, when they're able to come visit you. My youngest daughter came to visit me one day. She was with her mother, but her mother went off to the vending machine, and something was wrong with her. I said, what's wrong? And then she just put her head on my shoulder. I said, okay, she's going to tell me when she's ready. And then she told me, Dad, I grew up resenting you. I said, I can't remember a time where I didn't resent you. I said, why? Because you were never there for me. So that conversation stays with me. I was never there for her. So now I'm really understanding the impact that my incarceration. First, you blame the state. You're saying the state is responsible for my kids acting this way. But then you grow up out of there. You start saying, wait a minute, man, what part did I play in this? And then you start taking responsibility. And that's a part of my growth. My kids, they suffered to the point where they made a pact that they would not have children for fear that their children will go through what they went through. For kids to do that, That's impactful. So that helped me grow. That helped me understand. And we're talking about a time when children with incarcerated parents, that was not considered to be an adverse childhood experience. It is now. Fortunately, it is now, and it's being addressed. But back in the 80s, it wasn't considered that. So children was going through this trauma, this emotional, psychological trauma, and no one understood what they were going through. Not even the fathers, not even the mothers. It took us some time to understand that. So we started, looking at that. I started talking to my comrades inside, saying, listen, man, this. They said, yo, man, I'm experiencing the same thing. So we started taking, developing an approach to understanding this whole thing. And from these discussions, we developed programs, conscious building programs, pathways to empower ourselves, give us knowledge as to what we're really dealing with here and what role we played in it. And I think that was important for us to understand the role that we played in this whole thing that impacted not only us, but all our children and grandchildren. So this is the path that my growth took, and this is why I'm the person I am today.
How do you, if ever, make peace with your kids, with your grandchildren?
It's tough. It's tough because even now, you can't make up for 38 years. You can't. There's not something you can do. I didn't try to make up for this time. The time, it is what it is. All I can do is try to mend and reconcile and try to, develop a relationship with adults now, not children, adults. It's not smooth. It has its ups and downs. My oldest son is okay to the point where he can talk about what he experienced growing up. My youngest daughter, she doesn't want to talk about it. She just wants to move on without having to address what she went through. So they're all different. I got 4 kids, 2 daughters and 2 sons. So it's all different in trying to relate. But, we have our ups and downs still. Sometimes, you could see that they're going back to, when there was so much uncertainty in their lives. And they, in a sense, all of them moved on, two of them went to college. The 2 boys, one of the oldest boys, doing pretty good. He's a manager of a company. He's doing pretty good. The 2 girls are doing okay too.
While you're in federal prison, what's an experience that you witnessed that you'll never forget?
Well, I was ambushed. They thought it was an ambush. I anticipated it. I had got into a scuffle with some DC dudes. I knew that I got transferred. Whenever I go to the joint I go to, I know I got to be prepared to deal with them. So I was ambushed. That's why I got hit in the shoulder and the back. But I was prepared. And that taught me that being prepared saved my life. So I will never be unprepared. And that's just how you got to live. Once you made that first initial step in one direction, there's no turning back. So I learned just from my experiences that when we're dealing with people who the only thing they understand, really, really understand is violence, then you got to bring pure violence.
Was it hard being on guard in that manner, playing the defensive mode all those years and then coming out of prison and, you don't have to be that way?
It's still a game. It's an adjustment. Even now I tell people, worst case scenario, that's how I think. Whenever any confrontation, it doesn't matter because in prison, something small could be big in a second. So any small concentration, my analysis is worst case scenario first. And it's hard to get away from that because that's how I survived. I survive because I think about the worst case scenario before I do anything else and address it from that perspective. It's still, I'm still, even 6 years, I'm still trying to, not think that way, but it's difficult.
How many years were you in the feds for before they transferred you?
8 years in the feds, 30 in the state.
Were you worried about going to the state level based on things you had heard at the time?
No. When I went into the state from the feds, I was a different person. The state, it took a little adjustment because you hear people talking to themselves, among themselves, in a way that will invite death in the federal system. So it took a little bit of adjusting to know that the rules are different here. The culture is a little different here. You couldn't invite somebody in the federal prison system to your private parts. Just couldn't. Not without either killing the person or you getting killed. That's a cardinal violation in the federal prison system back then. When I came to the state, I heard it all day long. I said, wow. So it's different. And in this state, people say, razor tags. You never pick up a razor for somebody in the federal prison system. I mean, people laugh at you. You came at them with a razor. People got machetes, axes in the federal prison system. That's what they come with. And you come with a razor? It's a different culture.
Why do you think it's so different?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think because one thing is that you realize that you don't have your people you grew up with. For the most part, you're in places where you've never been. So you have to deal with things differently. And you have to be, whenever I learned, you have to be decisive. If you go one way, be decisive about it and no turning back. I think that's different than the state. You got more people rolling with you in the state.
How did the correctional officers treat you because you harmed someone in law enforcement?
Oh, I was always placed on high security everywhere I went. I never traveled with a big bus, a van of people. I've always traveled by myself.
Black box and everything. Did they treat you poorly because of that? Not
necessarily in the state or the feds. It's just that I was placed on high security wherever I went.
Now, in the state, what kind of yard did you go to? Was it locked down most of the day, or?
Oh, the state, no. It was more open in the federal prison system. The state's not as open. I mean, I had more time to myself in the federal prison system. I didn't really have to work. Prisons were bigger. The state, you got all this Attica. First place I went to was Attica, and it was like 4 prisons in one. Little yard for each block. So it's a little different.
What was it like going to trial facing a life sentence if you lost?
Well, I was offered a cop-out. A 15-year cop-out. But guaranteed 7. I wouldn't take it.
Do you wish you took it, looking back on it?
Nah, not really. I don't, I try not to really go back and wish for things different. I knew why I didn't take it. I didn't take it because, I wasn't going to admit to something they said. It didn't happen that way. It wasn't an ambush. We didn't ambush the cops. They said we ambushed them. They said we opened fire on them. That didn't happen that way. They jumped out their car with guns blazing. They just didn't expect return fire.
So after you got convicted, what did the judge exactly sentence you to?
25 years to life.
And what does that mean?
That I will serve 25. And he said he wished he could give me more.
So that means you're not eligible for parole until after
25 years.
Okay. And what are the odds at that point in your mind that you can even get out if it's 25 to life?
Very, very, especially when the judge says he wishes he can give me more. He said that there was a law out at that time that he says pass this law so that people like Saldana never get out of prison.
How'd that make you feel when he said that?
I kind of knew. I knew what he was trying to say. He was trying to say that I'm going to die in prison.
When does that sit in? That could be a reality, or did it never sit in?
It sat in. It sat in almost immediately. I knew. I seen these old heads in the prison. See how long they've been in prison. Seeing people die early in their 50s. I knew then that it came a point. Even during my parole hearings, that I kind of said, this is it. This is probably it for me. I even told the parole commissioner that. At that point, I was fully conscious. I had principles that I hold on to today. And I told that parole commissioner, who happens to be the chair of the New York State Parole Board, when the hearing first started, I said, listen, I just want to make a statement before you start this hearing. He says, there's nothing I can do to convince you to let me go. You got the power to just keep on denying me. He said, but I got one power. I said, the one power I have is that I'm going to choose to die an honorable man, whether it's in a prison cell with my family. Nothing you can do about that. Now let's go on with this hearing. They denied me. But that same commissioner wrote me a letter while she was the chair of the New York State Commissioner. When she got to see me out here, she says, for being a part of that panel that denied you at that time, I was wrong. And you have lived to die an honorable man, then and now. And I apologize for being wrong.
So how many times did it take you through parole? 5 times?
5 times.
What made it so special about the 5th one that they decided to let you go?
A parole commissioner, a newly appointed parole commissioner named Carol Shapiro, from a social work background, not law enforcement, that dominated the New York State Parole Board at the time. A social worker appointed by Como because rap exposed the parole board's bigotry and racism and inappropriate comments during parole hearings. They used as actual parole hearings and presented the evidence in a report to the governor. And when these parole commissioners who had law enforcement background, when their time expired, they usually appointed for 6-year terms. Expired, he did not reappoint them as they customarily do. Instead, he appointed 6 new commissioners from a diversified background. Social worker, member of the clergy, teacher, and one of these newly appointed parole commissioners with a social service background was the lead commissioner in my case when I appeared. And she asked me one question about the crime I committed in 1979. Just like they always do, they open up with this. And then she says, I thought, here we go again. I told her exactly what happened, according to their version. He said, let's talk about what you've done the last 38 years of your life. Usually these hearings last 8 minutes. This one lasted 45 minutes. Talking about what I've done the last 38 years of my life. And she released me. And rap was responsible for her being on the parole board.
Did you know what rap was at the time?
Yeah.
How did you find out about them?
Because my wife actually was working with rap in the early stages when it was first formed. She somehow met one of the founders, and she was telling me about rap. So I was already aware. In fact, rap wrote letters for me supporting my release.
When you're serving that much time, does the violence ever get old? Does the doing the life in prison aspect of it get old where you're like, I don't want to do this. I want to do something else?
What do you mean? You don't want to?
In regards to like maybe doing programs or, not running with prison politics or anything like that. Does that get old?
I have long discarded that jailhouse mentality, the street mentality. At this point in my life, maybe for the last, as my kids were growing older, and I've seen the hurt, seen the harm, I started developing into a different person. I started wanting to get out of prison, so that I could help, so I could be there for them. So at this point, I was already, and I didn't care too much about the jailhouse politics. I didn't care too much about the organizations. I was already creating something for myself and others who was thinking like me, who was trying to find a place, for themselves. So we was coming together as often as we can in the yard, in the gym, in the blocks, having these long discussions for months, years, conceptualizing our experiences, putting things on paper, and then trying to develop courses and seminars and workshops, to help ourselves and each other on how we're going to get out this mess. We're taking responsibility for the role we play. So now, where do we go from here? How do we help our families out there? And how do we help each other out here? Some of us are not going to make it. We realize that. Some of us are going to die in prison. But some of us are going to make it. What are we going to do? Those who make it, what are they going to do to try to change these conditions for us? So I already had a vision of what I wanted to do. And it was clear to me that one thing I knew for sure, I didn't know that I was going to be the director of rap. I knew I was going to be involved with rap. I had no idea that I was going to be the director. It was 10 months after I got out. But one thing I knew when I walked out of prison, that the men who helped me become the man I am today, those who helped me along this journey, that I was not going to forget those who had already died, and I was not going to forget those that are still alive and that I'm leaving behind.
When you got granted parole, were you afraid of going back into the free world after, serving 38 years inside? What was it kind of like your mindset?
I wasn't afraid. I was, it was challenging. Everything was challenging. Getting on a subway was challenging. I'm not accustomed to people pushing up on me. That didn't make me feel good. I had to get used to that again. You keep all them decades. You keep people at arm's distance. Now you got all these people rubbing up on you. So I had to get adjusted to that. I had to get adjusted to walking past military cops, without having that tense feeling that they're just about to pull me over. Everything, I'm thinking that they're going to violate me for any little thing, So it took a little bit of psychological and emotional adjustment. But I was on a mission. I knew that I had to do something. Rap was responsible for me to get out because they were responsible for putting that commissioner who released me. So I had an obligation to do something for those I left behind. And I took that out. I didn't tell anybody, I didn't make no promises like other people made promises to me, but I took that obligation serious. I said, I'm going to do something. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to do something to help others get out. Too many of us died in prison at a young age. And I knew that I just couldn't live on. I'm not going to go on with my life without being at least satisfied that I tried.
Do you come across a lot of people that don't believe in giving you a second chance?
Absolutely.
How do you address that?
We have discussions. We advocate for people who committed serious violent crimes, we advocate for their release. And we advocate that it's an injustice that Black and brown people are disproportionately in prison doing more time, denied parole more often than the white counterparts. The racial disparities, this is pretty clear. So we try to address these issues. Mass incarceration is real. What it did to families is devastating. My family is probably better off than a lot of other families that were hit harder. So these things are real for us. But we also know that the same people who are impacted by mass incarceration and the legal system are also impacted by interpersonal violence in our communities. That's just a reality. So when we talk about people who committed murder to be released and returned back to their families because they're community ready, we get, well, what about the person who killed my son? We get that. We get that a lot. And all we can do is continue the conversation with them. We show them that we are the only ones that are really concerned about this. The state used you to convict somebody and give them a life sentence. So another family lost a son to the system. But they don't care nothing about you as a mother. They don't care about how you're feeling. They don't care about the trauma that you will forever live. But we do, because we created a program so that those who are released will be in our communities to stop this interpersonal cycle of violence in our communities. They're not doing that. We're doing that. We developed that concept of credible messenger. We developed the concept of violence interrupters, not the state, not the New York City Police Department. We did that because we want to give back and we're concerned about what's happening in our communities. My grandchildren are living in our communities. So we have this conversation and we don't always win, but we are persuading the community, people in our communities, the majority of the people in our communities do support that people who are community ready should not languish in prison until they die.
Yeah, that's very true what you said about how the prosecution and law enforcement does use the victim for their advantage in these cases, and then kind of pushes them to the side once it's over with.
And only calls on them when the parole hearing comes up again. Now they got to relive that whole trauma.
And forgiveness, I guess, is a big part of this too, if the person's willing to forgive and how fresh it is. And I do believe like time is a big healer too. Is the person that committed the crime when they're 17, 18, 19, 30 years ago the same person, that they are today? That it poses a lot of questions. And it really makes you think about we as humans as a whole.
And I've seen the kids come in, when they said that these Black and brown kids were super predators. I seen them come in with 50, 60, 75 years to life, 16, 17 years old. And I left them in there. They're still in there, 16, 17 years old. 40 years later, they're still in there because they were labeled super predators and got extra time, enhanced punishment. And if this was happening to white kids going into the prison system with this kind of numbers, death by incarceration centers at that scale, there would be mass outrage in our society. But because they're Black and brown, nobody cares.
Did you ever see a younger version of yourself coming through the prison doors?
All the times.
How did that affect you when you saw that?
I see people and I say, this guy could have been my son. So just look at him. We're able to reach them. We developed the programs. We invited them to these programs. We were able to reach them. And this is why, family members come to us as a last resort. We have a sister who her brother sent her to me. Her brother sent her to me because I raised her brother when he came in at 16 years old. 35 years later, he's still there. He lost hope. He finally said, why don't you go see Rap? See that brother, Jose Hamza. Tell him I sent you. They changed. They were crazy, wild kids. But 30 years later, some of them are jailhouse lawyers. Some of them are managed to get into college. Some of them wrote books. Some of them never had anything. Some of them never had a father. The only father figure they had was somebody in prison who cared about them. I mean, how do you keep somebody like that in prison? So we have their families telling their stories. We have Lisette. She went to the UN speaking about her brother's case, pleading with the UN to declare that these sentences on these kids is a human rights violation. So, and they see it. One thing I say, these kids, they're no longer kids. But because we have become so visible, they see, man, the programs that I was developing with these other guys, there's a long waiting list now. Everybody wants to get into these programs. We gave them hope.
What's one piece of advice you want people to take away from your story? The lesson that you want to be told? That
a sentence should never be permanent. You can't throw human beings away. You got to give them an opportunity to grow, to become better human beings. And it happens more than anything else happens in prisons. You have stabbings in prison, you have murders in prisons, you have people ODing in prison. But the one thing that happens more than anything else combined is people are growing. They're developing. They're becoming better human beings. And sometimes, more often than not, they're doing it without any reward. My mentors, there was no reward in it for them. They knew they were going to die in prison, but yet they still did it. So this is what you have people who have served as life coaches, professors, who do it, and they do it to an entire generation without any hope for a reward. So that shows you that human beings can become better human beings than those even in the street. I think the most socially, civic-minded human beings in our communities are formerly incarcerated people, because they know they're responsible, in part, for the conditions in their community. And they take that responsibility serious. It's almost sacred to us that we have the obligation to help repair harm. And this is what we're committed to. No matter what else we do in life, we have an obligation to help repair harm because we take responsibility for some of this. And now we have to hold the state also accountable for doing what they should do.
Jose, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate you trusting me to interview you and sit down with me today. And I love what you guys are doing, and I'm happy I could be a part of it by sharing your story.
Thank you.
You probably never expected you'd be sitting down on a podcast while you're in prison.
Not like this, no, definitely not.
It's definitely something different.
I didn't even know podcasts existed.
It's okay. I didn't either until a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we got to do this, and thank you again to Jeannie for connecting us.
Thank you.